On today's show, I talk about long exposure photography and I get a haircut. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 2 of Inside the Lens with Jesse Martineau. That's me. How do you like my red sweater? I hope I don't look like giant red tomato. Good thing I'm not wearing a green hat. I want to talk a little bit about my favorite kind of photography. Long exposure photography. What is long exposure photography? Long exposure photography is when you must keep your shutter open for a length of time. I mean, in reality, it's always open for some length of time, but this one's longer. Long exposure photography has become a drug for me. I am addicted. I'm also addicted to pizza, hence why I look like a giant tomato. But in your camera, you can turn your shutter speed to something, let's say, longer than 1 second. During the day, you're gonna find out in a hurry that if you take a 1 second exposure, you're gonna be looking at a white piece of paper, kind of like my brain when I wake up in the morning. If you were to do the same thing at night, you would find out that there is a lot more light out there than originally thought. One of my favorite things about photography is revealing what's actually out there. I was taking a friend of mine out on a photo shoot one night. I more dragged him along, actually. And we were standing in the middle of a dark road and I started to take a photo. This one was 30 seconds long. And so we talked mostly about deep, really meaningful things of life. And I get on I'm a pretty smart guy. So I like to hear myself talk. But 30 seconds later, click, and on the LCD screen pops up the scene. He looks at it and says, I had no idea that was even there. See, photography is about capturing the light. Even in the middle of the night, there's light. Stars, moon, street lights, the flashlights I'm using to try to evade wildlife. But if you can have a long exposure image, if you can keep your shutter open for a length of time, what you're gonna discover is there is a lot of light in every scene. Some of these images that I'm showing you now with the Aurora Borealis and some other night shots, they are revealing what I'm talking about. If you wanna learn a little bit more about night photography in particular, click the link in the box below. It's down there somewhere, below my hands, below this line. But today I want to talk about long exposure photography during the daytime. Well, Jesse, that's crazy. How would you ever figure out to do that? Well, it turns out someone figured this all out for me. To take long exposure images during the daytime, you need a filter. Now, a filter goes in front of your lens. This is a 10-stop filter, meaning that you can dial up your f-stops for 10 stops higher. That gives you a lot more range than the lens itself. And what happens is, you can keep your shutter open during the day for a very long time. I've taken images up to 15 minutes long during a sunset. What I do in that time, I should never put on this show. But if you can attach one of these to your lens, you're gonna discover in a real hurry, a whole new world of photography has just opened up to you. Right now, I'm gonna show you some of the images that I've captured using long exposure. The cool thing about long exposure photography, it makes things that we normally see appear much different. You can see the clouds trail out longer. The water is smooth and sometimes looks like ice. Waterfalls become milky and smooth. Smooth like a baby's bottom. I've changed 3 diapers in my life, so I'm just assuming they are. Now, filters range in price. This one I got very cheap from eBay. It's a Tiffin 3.0. It was around $80 American. The one I really like and really want, though, is the Lee filter system. Someone should buy me that. Someone should buy me that. The Lee filter system uses a holder that you slide plates of glass in front of the lens, which means that you can fit it on almost any lens whatsoever versus the kind where you must screw it in. I said screw. Quick little trick, if you can buy step up or step down rings, buy the biggest size filter you can and use those rings to fit any of your lenses. Now, another piece of equipment you're gonna need to take long exposure photos is this thing. This is a remote shutter that plugs right into your camera. You need to make sure that the remote you get fits actually into your camera. This one in particular was extremely cheap, again from eBay. Man, I love eBay. And it's just a button that can lock into place. When this button is locked into place, your shutter will stay open until you turn it off. This allows you to push past the 30-second or 1 minute or whatever limitation your camera gives you for length of exposure. And during a nice sunset, with the clouds moving really quickly, you're gonna want to keep this thing open for some time. Another time this comes in handy is during the night, where you can produce star trails if you just look up into the sky. Into the sky, into the sky. I just made that song up. Long exposure photography really comes alive though when you start to edit it in your computer. You can produce a wide range of effects, colors, motion, and dynamic range when you spend some time on each photo. Check out my other videos here on this channel and watch me edit a long exposure image live. Well, not really live, but live action. Yeah. And if you want to read a little bit more about long exposure photography, there's another link down below. We went through all that before. We don't need to do that again. All right, I hope that helps you understand a little bit more about long exposure photography. It's extremely fun. It's my favorite form of photography because it gives you so many options even when the conditions aren't perfect. Just a few tips. And now Jesse's tips for long exposure photography. Tip number 1, get a filter that you can fit on multiple lenses. Tip number 2, don't forget this guy at home. I did that once, it was horrible. It ruins your whole day, the whole day. Tip number 3, figure out what a longer exposure and a shorter exposure will do. Tip number 4, I'm not a crook. Take as many long exposures as you can. That's gonna help you learn what you need to do for each scene. And tip number 5, you have to use a tripod. You can't hold a camera still for 15 minutes. I can't hold it still for 0.15 of a second. And those are my tips for long exposure photography. I really hope you try this. It's gonna expand your universe of what a camera can actually do. Cameras can do a lot. Well, they can't make me dinner. That's a good point. But they can do a lot. Now, Snapchat of the week. Time to get my hair cut. Steph, what are you doing?
Trying to help you, Jesse.
Help me?
You don't have much to work with.
Great. Steph, what are you doing?
Rinsing.
Don't use any shampoo. It makes me melt. There's all the hair. Thanks, Steph.
Pay me.
Hey, listen guys, thanks for watching. It was really fun doing this episode, and I hope together we can continue to change the photography world. That's all for this episode. My name's Jesse Martineau, and remember, keep clicking.